Hello everyone. Today I'm working on the second video in my three-part series about mental health. In this video I'm going to be discussing my history and struggle with mental illness, basically from late high school to present day. If you're interested in knowing more about the other two videos I'm doing, please check out their description, this video's description. So you might ask yourself, why are you doing this? Well, first off, I'm an educator. And my job as an educator is to educate people about things. And so my first real goal here is that I'm hoping by telling this story, explaining like struggles I went through and things like that, that'll help people who don't struggle with mental illness kind of understand what those of us who struggle with it day to day, kind of what we go through. And to kind of maybe help erase some of that stigma and stuff that's attached to mental illness. And then the second reason I'm doing this is I'm hoping maybe somebody who hasn't taken the steps yet to get the help that they need, or if you know somebody who's in that position, hopefully watching this might help motivate them to go need to recover, get healthy, and to be happy. Because it is possible. So, one other quick note. If you happen to be a friend or a family member watching this and you're like, wow, I didn't know this at all, or I didn't know this part, or things like that, please don't take any kind of personal offense that I never talked to you about this. There's reasons I kept a lot of this very close to my chest. I'm going to talk about some of those reasons here in a minute, but I had reasons, so I never meant to offend anybody or upset anybody by making those choices. All right. So, here we go. Quick little background. So I grew up in a farming family in Midwest Illinois. I had two very loving parents. I have an older sister who has a family and very loving people there. Had lots of friends in high school and college, or at least plenty of them. Did well in school. I never had to worry about like a roof over my head, shirt on my back, food on the table, any of those types of things. I never had any major traumas or anything along those lines. It's just very much average Joe, Midwest America kind of guy. I did start to notice in later high school, and particularly in college, that I had some problems. I'd have depressive episodes or anxiety episodes where it's really hard for me to do things with other people. A lot of times I'd just be like, oh, I'm sick, or, let's just stay in tonight, or things like that. So I didn't have to interact with anyone, or I didn't have to interact with a lot of people. I would have strange thoughts. And so I'm calling these strange thoughts because I don't know how else to explain them. And if you've never experienced these types of things, then it's going to sound weird. It's going to sound strange. So I'm going to do my best to explain to you what these types of things would be. So yeah, again, if this sounds weird, it is weird. I can't explain it any other way aside from that. So this would include things like racing thoughts. I'd be thinking really fast. Sometimes it would even cause me to like walk really fast, or like write really fast, or things like that. And I couldn't always keep up with what I was thinking. Sometimes I'd become overly ambitious, start a lot of activities, or I'd be like, oh, this is a project that's going to take me a month to do, I can finish it in 2 hours, things like that. Sometimes I'd have like irrational anger about things. So maybe I would have a lamp that normally took like say 2 clicks to turn on. There'd be times where I'd go to turn that lamp on and it'd take those 2 clicks like it always did. For some reason, it would just piss me off to the point that I would just break the lamp. I wouldn't think about, like, the reaction would happen faster than I could even really, like, think about what I was... So I would destroy that lamp, and then I'd have to go buy a new lamp. And there's other times where I'd have trouble, like, with reality. The best way I can describe it is, like, when you wake up from a dream, kind of have those few seconds or so where you're still kind of like, am I awake? Am I asleep? So that state of mind, but kind of over, several minutes to maybe an hour type period. There are times where I'd have these thoughts like I had a specific purpose or mission. And all I can tell you is that if you had asked me what that mission was, I couldn't tell you then, and I can't tell you today. Just these grandiose thoughts. And then the other thing would be that sometimes it would drive me to make some very poor choices that thankfully never had any major consequences on my life, but definitely would affect my life. These would be things these poor choices would affect like relationships I had with people. It'd affect my schoolwork at times, choices I'd make concerning my personal health, even things like, how I spent my money at times. And like I said, luckily none of them were ever massive enough consequences. I was really in a bad place. They just weren't sometimes good choices. Now, all that being said, none of these things occurred like nonstop. So it's not like from age 17, age 21, this happened every day, every hour of my life. It happened in spurts. So maybe a week time, but I may have something happen for a week and then go several months with nothing. A lot of times these things were mixed together. So, I might have, during like an anxiety episode, I might have the irrational anger tied into the racing thoughts and stuff, and just other combinations of those things. Sometimes I would just have one thing without any of the other. So there's that. And then also, I don't want to make this sound like I'm explaining away bad choices I've made in my life. I've made bad choices simply because I've made bad choices. There are some of those choices I made that were influenced by my mental illness, but not every choice I've made in life was bad choice influenced by mental illness. Sometimes it was just bad choice. So even though I have a mental illness, I am not that mental illness. It's just a part of me, and sometimes that affects what I do. Sometimes it doesn't. I never got help during those times because of things like I was afraid of the stigma. I didn't want people thinking I was crazy and couldn't be trusted or unreliable or unsafe to be around. I didn't want people thinking I was just trying to get attention or that I wanted a pat on the back or anything like that. I was afraid I'd bring shame and embarrassment to my family and friends. If I said anything that be so embarrassed by me or ashamed by me that I'd lose them. I honestly thought if I admitted to any of this, someone would show up with a white coat, put me in a straitjacket, they'd throw me in a padded room, and I'd never see anyone I cared about ever. And finally, I just thought I could power through it. I honestly thought that just having happy thoughts when I was sad, listening to calm music when I was anxious or angry, just working harder, just distracting, whatever, I could just get through it. And what I can say now, at this point in my life, is that those were just excuses I made to protect myself. They were excuses I made so I wouldn't admit to myself that there's a problem and get the help that I need. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, I have these, I've these same problems and things like that, I will say this. One, there's a stigma attached to mental illness, and people are going to think whatever they're going to think about it. You just need to realize that that's the case. And as hard as it is to sometimes deal with that stigma, that it's just kind of the way things are, and you just, sometimes just kind of have to ignore it. Again, it's hard. It is hard. Making these videos, putting this out there, I know that there's going to be some stigma attached to it. It's hard for me to do it. But it's not preventing me from doing it, because ultimately, it's not that I don't care, but I'm at a point where I can just say, well, your opinion, and I can move on. Honestly, if any of your friends or family are ashamed of you or embarrassed because of a mental illness, then they don't care about you that much. That's the honest truth. Anyone that truly cares and loves you isn't going to be ashamed or embarrassed that you're admitting that you need some kind of help. They're going to want you to get help. They're going to want you to recover, and they're going to want you to be happy. And again, if you think your friends are going to be embarrassed, then they aren't as close of friends, Maybe you need to find other supports. It's like that. As far as being locked away, as far as I know, for anything I've said already, you couldn't be locked away for. Even if you are thinking of hurting yourself, you're thinking of hurting others, they aren't going to lock you away like Hannibal Lecter. You will probably be hospitalized. You'll probably meet with a psychiatrist and some therapists, work out something to help you with medication and to help you work out with what's going on. But it's mainly you're going to be put in a hospital so that they can help you recover, get healthy, and be able to go out and do whatever you need to do. But as far as like that idea of like locked away forever, as far as I know, that's not entirely a true idea. And in this idea of powering through it, yeah, you might be able to some, but in my case, eventually caught up to. I don't know that you can truly just power through it for the rest of your life. So after college, I went, got a teaching job, and things were going pretty good. Since that first year teaching, and I hit a little period where I was having some depression and anxiety, and they weren't bad. On their own, they weren't bad. They were something I dealt with in the past, and I knew I could deal with again. But for whatever reason, with this particular bout, I was having insomnia. And if you've never had insomnia, it's awful. I was never a good sleeper to begin with. I didn't sleep all that well anyways. So this just made it worse. I would go, a couple nights without sleep. I'd sleep sometimes, but it would be really erratic. So maybe I'd sleep like half an hour, then I'd be awake for. Or I'd just kind of like lay on the couch and stare at the TV and drift in and out of sleep. Things like that. And really, the reason I got help at this point really wasn't so much because of like the depression or anxiety. It was just mixing those two things with the insomnia. I was just so emotionally spent. I was mentally exhausted. I physically just felt horrible. Just, I wasn't sleeping, and just all of that tied together, I just felt miserable. And realized, like, I can't go on like this. So I called my doctor. My doctor was like, this sounds like something you need to talk to a therapist or a psychiatrist about. They got me in touch with my behavioral health services through my hospital. I met with therapists. They did like a little survey and were able from that to diagnose me with generalized anxiety and depression disorder, I think. So I was like, oh, okay, so what do we do? And they said, well, we're going to continue therapy, talk therapy, and then we're going to give you, you're going to meet with a psychiatrist, and they're going to give you medications. Got my first medication, took it, didn't go well, gave me migraines for 2 days, called the psychiatrist, was like, this isn't working, I need something else. Psychiatrist said, all right, here's this other medication, tried it. It made me sick, both physically sick and then just super nauseous to the point where I couldn't eat. Just standing or sitting made me sick to my stomach. I tried it for 3 days because I was like, I'm going to give it a shot. Maybe if I give it, if I give it enough time, my body will adjust and I'll be okay. But after like 3 days, it wasn't getting any better. I called my doctor or psychiatrist back and I was like, hey, this isn't working. He said, okay, third medication. So luckily the third medication worked. It helped make my depressive episodes less depressive. One of its side effects is that it makes you sleepy. And so because of the insomnia, that's one of the reasons I got it. So I was getting sleep. So I started feeling better sleeping. But it had drawbacks. One, I gained weight. And at that particular time, I was actually exercising regularly. That I still was gaining weight was kind of upsetting. But ultimately, because I felt better emotionally, like this is just a price to pay. And then the other thing is it kind of dampened my good moods too. So even though it was making it so I wasn't as depressed, it also made it so I wasn't as happy. Kind of wasn't that I couldn't be happy, it just wasn't as happy as I could be. So it kind of had some drawbacks. And then the other thing, and I just I don't know why, I still would have some of these other thoughts. For whatever reason, they didn't really come up during my interview, and I never really brought them up during therapy. Because I just kind of was like, oh, these strange thoughts and stuff, that's just me. That I'm just weird. And just kind of pushed it to the side, which was not the right choice to make. So, I went back, I was still teaching, and after a few personal things happened, and then just I wasn't happy with where I was at that particular point in my life, I decided to stop teaching and to go to grad school. Grad school was great. I met the woman who'd become my wife there. My roommate there would become a good friend. I enjoyed my classes, people I was interacting with. It's good. It was a fun time. It was a good time. The last year of grad school, I got married in the fall. And then in the spring, and to this day, I don't know. Just, it happened. In the spring, all of a sudden, I had a massive depressive episode. Worst depression I've ever had. I wasn't really thinking of hurting myself or anything like that, but I was so depressed. I had no motivation to do anything. Hard to get myself motivated to get out of bed, brush my teeth, to take a shower, to eat, anything. And when you're that depressed, you just don't see any way, like, none of those things matter to you. It's inconsequential to you. In my case, I just wanted to be left alone. I just wanted to be put in a box, stuck in a closet, and close the closet door. Just leave me alone. That's what I wanted. And this was going on for a couple weeks. And it never got better. Or wasn't getting better. And so I ended up dropping out of grad school because I could not. I was missing class because I just couldn't go. And I ended up talking with my psychiatrist, and they said, okay, let's adjust your medication. They added another medication in, and things seem to have gotten better. So then over the summer, things seemed better. And in the fall, I decided to get a new teaching job. I was too embarrassed to go back to grad school because of the way I left. Really, I shouldn't have been, but I was. So I got a teaching job and started in the fall. Things were going good at the outset, and then about 3 months or so in, everything just unraveled. The depression that I thought I'd kind of tackled back in the spring came back. Unbridled fear. Just everything unraveled. I all of a sudden was so depressed. What I thought in the spring was bad, it's now, I don't know, 10,000 times worse. I was getting to the point where I finally was starting to think. Those thoughts of hurting myself, I was thinking them for about a week. And finally one day I was in the shower getting ready to go to work. And I just realized, like, if I go to work, I don't know if I'm going to come back home. That scared me and upset me. So I went and woke up my wife and I said, here's what's going on. She said, well, let's go to the hospital. I said, okay, that's probably a good option. So we went to the ER. I met with a therapist. The therapist gave me two options. She said I could either, they'd give me like a sedative, like Xanax, could go home, contact my psychiatrist, and then work things out that way. Or if I thought it was more severe, they could submit me to a mental health hospital where I could get more intensive care. So talking with my wife, I realized, like, I need something more intense. This is bad. She agreed with me, and so went to Blessing Hospital in Quincy, where I was admitted. The first thing they did is they ran a bunch of tests to, like, check my thyroids and if I had diabetes and stuff, because there are physical ailments that can actually cause some of these emotional stress type things. So I want to eliminate those because I don't want to just jump in and think you have mental illness if there's something else that's actually causing. So once they cleared all that out of the way, they're like, okay, now let's start figuring out what's going on. So I met with a psychiatrist, talked about a whole bunch of stuff, and it was probably the most open I'd ever been to anybody up to that point about what was going on. And they gave me a new diagnosis. You have bipolar type 2 disorder. I didn't know what that was. That like depression? What is that? Psychiatrist was like, well, we don't call it manic depression anymore. We call it bipolar. There's different types. There's bipolar type 1, which tends to be more severe in what goes on with a person. There's bipolar type 2. There's a rapid cycling form, and then there's another one, I believe. I don't remember. But while I was at the hospital, I did individual therapy, did group therapy, got medication. I was there about a week, so we were able to work out kind of a medication that seemed to be working for me. But they told me that it could take weeks, months. Oh, it could take a while before we figure out a medication that really works for you. So I left after about a week because things were doing better. It wasn't great. Things weren't back to normal. I was doing better. But while I was there, one of the things I learned, and it's always stuck with me, is that you need, in order to really recover, in order to remain healthy, one of the things you really need is a strong support network. That could be made up of family, it could be friends, it could be family and friends, whatever, but you need a support network to help you to be healthy. And the reasons are varied. They're everything from having somebody who can help remind you when you're, say, really depressed, that things are going to get better. Just to remind you of that. To help make sure you're getting your medication. Or just a shoulder to cry on. Or whatever. Having that support is going to help you stay healthy and maintain a good, healthy life. So that was something I learned there that probably more than anything else has stuck with me. I really don't remember what we did during group therapy or my individual therapy at the time. That was just something that I learned kind of while I was there and always kind of stuck with me. So it took time. For basically the 6-7 months after I got out of the hospital, I had to resign my position teaching. I worked some odd jobs because I needed to make money, but I couldn't do anything that involved working with the public because I was still having mood swings and my emotions were everywhere. I just didn't trust myself to working with the public. So I did some odd jobs. Things got better. Started teaching again. And the first couple years back was rough. Teaching's very stressful, and you're trying to deal with a mental illness that particularly doesn't respond well to stress. It can make having a job that's stressful very difficult. I'm not gonna say I had smooth sailing. There were rough seas, and once we finally, like I said, it probably took 2-3 years really get the medication regimen that would help me the most to get that figured out. And I still, to this day, 9 years later, I still have to be very aware of my emotions and what's going on daily. I have to look for triggers. I've been able to identify some things that trigger me in some cases. So I have to be aware of those things. Just all sorts of other things that you don't think of, like exercise, diet. Those things may sound normal, but like for me, they can be particularly important. They can help me manage mood, remain stable and stuff. I'm much more open with wife about things because I know she's basically kind of the front line. She's going to be the one's going to be able to help me the most quickly. So there's things like that I've had to adjust with. I understand that there's just times where I can't work because of my mood, because of my emotion. There's just times where I just literally cannot work. I have to stay home. And like we always talk about mental health days, these are truly mental health days for me. Because something's going on. I still have depression. I still have anxiety at times. I still have these strange thoughts at times. Everything doesn't last as long, isn't necessarily as. So I'm able to typically deal with things in a much more responsible manner. I was 9 years. Yeah. And things have been pretty good. I have a loving family. I have a wife and 2 kids, and I have friends, my other family that I can always fall back on if I need help. And as long as I keep taking care of myself, I will remain healthy and be able to be happy with what's going on around me. So, again, I hope this was helpful some way. I hope maybe, again, it helps educate people about what's going on when somebody stuff. I'm hoping that it is able to maybe help someone somewhere. So if before I leave, if you or someone you know needs help, if it's an emergency, call 911. And if you can't call 911 for some reason, you can always call the suicide hotline if you're thinking of hurting yourself. That's 1-800-273-TALK. Don't be embarrassed to call 911 for somebody, because the last thing you want to do is to not make that phone call and then they end up hurting themselves. And if you're contemplating hurting yourself, or you're having some other major concern, call 911. Again, there's going to be people who can help you, and you won't know if they can help you until you try, until you reach out. So it's better to make that call and deal with the other things, because those other things are probably more minor than you actually think they are. And then if it's not an emergency, contact your doctor. You can always call local hospital. You can look and see if there's a behavioral health services for your hospital, the health department. Talk to a teacher or professor that you trust. A family member or friend of the family, religious, pastor, priest, whatever. If you need help and it's not an emergency, reach out. There's someone within your life who cares enough that they're going to figure out how to help you. There's probably more than one, but there's definitely somebody that you probably know within your life that's there to help you and cares enough about you to help you. So reach out for help. If it's not an emergency, take those kinds of avenues. I will help. If you reach out to me, I'll help however I can. My resources are limited, but I will help in whatever way I can. Again, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. I hope you found something insightful here, and I'll be getting the 3rd video out shortly. So have a good one. I'll see you all later. Stay safe and stay healthy. Bye.